Hi, my name is Anne McElhenney.
And I'm 𝙈𝙤𝙘 𝙃𝙪𝙣, and I didn't realize we were starting the podcast just now. Okay.
So this is Anne McElhenney in Los Angeles and 𝙈𝙤𝙃 𝙃𝙪𝙣 in?
Belgrade, Serbia. Or someone said the other day, didn't realize you were in Siberia.
Yeah, thank God you're not in Siberia, but I believe the weather isn't great there at the moment, right, Phil?
No, it's a bit wet and miserable and dark and grey.
Okay. Well, it's week 82. That's 1 year and 7.5 months since the 2 weeks to flatten the curve lockdown. And it's 4.5 months since it was revealed, we found out, that Hunter Biden had used the N-word, and the mainstream media in the United States and around the world have failed to report on it.
Indeed. And of course, that is why I'm in Serbia, is making the Hunter Biden movie, My Son Hunter. So that will be given a full report on that later on, and all the news that's fit to print from Serbia, and some that's not. Later on, we'll talk to Robert Bryce, our friend and the author of the Power Hungry podcast, about our bleak energy future and how it's absolutely got nothing to do with the green movement at all. No way. Absolutely not.
And we have 2 lessons in how not to do journalism from the most trusted sources of how not to do journalism.
Actually, there's a lot of those, though. There's a lot of those.
There's a lot of competition, right?
A lot of competition. And it's not what you know. It's basically how you can screw the system. A lesson from Hunter Biden and his friends. And crazy California. The latest from Anne and Film versus the city of Santa Monica. An update on our lawsuit. Or rather, Film's lawsuit, or my lawsuit. Anne's the victim.
Yes.
I shall be in. Yes, I'm the pro bono attorney.
Exactly. And we have, believe it or not, the last part, which I was delighted to see 𝙈𝙤 in our show notes. 𝙈𝙤 has found a recipe, sort of 𝙈𝙤's favorite Serbian dish, and we're going to hear all about that.
Yes, I think it's called caramelized raspberries. It's called something very plain. We were in a building with a gymkhana, with an equestrian center. I said, don't you call that a gymkhana, equestrian? No, in Serbian we call it an internal equestrian place for horses.
Tell us about Belgrade. Tell us about Serbia. You've been there a little over a week now. How is things?
Yes. Well, the weather has changed. It's got quite grey and miserable. So we're doing a lot of scouting. We're here with Robert Davi, the director, and the production team. We're doing some rewriting, which I hope that means cutting, really, because, as Robert did say when we first saw it, this is a very rich script. Hunter Biden has a very rich life, and this movie's been funded by the people who listen to this podcast, and there is a finite budget, so we're trying to fit the budget into our ambitions. So we're looking at locations, we're meeting department heads. So I don't know if I mentioned last week, there's a sugar factory. It's just this amazing place where this eccentric politician guy bought a sugar factory and decided to have a couple of avant-garde theaters in it. And now he also rents it as film sets, and it's just all sorts of crazy. Look at that large white bull there. There was a submarine. There's a boat there. There's an aviary. There's a bird cage. And funny, when we were first out there, there was a movie, another American movie was being shot there, and you could see it. And I went up and talked to the producer, and she says, "I said, what's the movie called?" She goes, "It's a movie called Slaughterhouse." I was going, "Okay," and she goes, "It's a horror," and I was going, "Really? I didn't think it was a rom-com."
Yeah, with a title like that, nothing good can come from anything with a title like that.
Yeah, so we're looking at locations. There's lots of places that can pass as Eastern Europe and the Ukraine, where Hunter did his dirty dealings. But I suppose we're looking for places like the Chateau Marmont, Los Angeles hotels, Los Angeles apartments. Luckily, there's some good places. Some people came back from America with American ideas of houses and apartments, so they built those. So there are American educated architects working here. So there are some houses that we can rent that look like American houses. But we're trying, as I say, we're trying to fit our budget into our ambitions. I wasn't feeling too well there a few days ago, and Robert Davi, the director, turns to me and says, "Is your blood pressure okay?" And I says, "It's fine until you tell me what you want to do for a certain scene." I'm just joking, but obviously he's the director. He's got a great image and a great vision, and we just have to try and find places. And there may be a place that suits what he wants to do, but it would mean taking the company on a trip across town and packing up and unpacking. And so we'd lose half a day. So we have to decide, okay, this location is perfect for her, what we want to do here, but is it worth losing a half a day of shooting? And Robert is basically saying it's not. We need to get lots of shots. We need to get lots of footage. And we need to try and stay in a few locations. You know, yeah, there are plenty of places, you know, that would pass as Ukraine. Fun fact about Belgrade, or perhaps not fun fact about Belgrade, depending on where you're coming from. There are almost no strip bars in Belgrade.
Oh, that's a terrible tragedy, Phil. I'm just, Magda and I here are distraught to hear that. How
Yes.
dreadful. But there are some, though, I hope.
There are some. I just want to assure everyone I'm not cruising the strip bars. Obviously, Hunter Biden spent a significant amount of time in strip bars. And we remember when we lived in Romania, we lived in Romania for 7 years. We were journalists there. There was a strip bar in every corner. You go to, in Bucharest, you go to the smallest town, there's a strip bar.
Yes.
Here, there are 3 in a country, at a capital city with a population of 1.2 million. There are 3 strip bars. I really like Belgrade, actually. It's and Serbia. It's you can smell, you know, I say it's a city where men are men and women are women, you know, and there's no street crime, you know. Almost, I mean, I said to the guys there, and everyone said no street crime. And they said you can leave your bags, you can leave your computers in your car while we go. I'm saying, are you sure? He says, no. He says, one of the guys says, well, yeah, the only time I've ever had my car broken into and the equipment stolen was when I was filming in San Francisco.
That sounds like a familiar story to us, by the way.
Yeah. So the guy from Belgrade, you know, so, you know, we hear a lot about toxic masculinity and how dangerous it is, etc. But, you know, there's a lot of masculinity here and no street crime. So, you know, it's almost as if, you know, just a theory, the absence of masculinity in some of the more progressive Western cities allows the emergence of a predatory criminal class and a predatory male. It was always there and feels empowered because there's no masculinity around. Just a thought, I don't know if it's true, but you can smell this freedom, this sense of, you know, we do what we want to do here in Belgrade. You know, every bar and every cafe and every public space is non-smoking. That's the law. And every bar and every cafe you go in, you can literally chew tobacco, right? Chewing smoke. It is like you are eating it.
So you're basically saying that they have signs up saying no smoking and everyone is smoking. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. And there's signs on the tables and all that.
Oh, no.
Away.
And no one does anything about it.
And, you know, it's like reliving the 80s and 90s. I was saying, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I was in a bar or a restaurant and came home. And the next day I went to put on my coat and I couldn't wear it because of the smoke. So I had to put it out on the balcony to air it for a day.
Oh yeah, I have such clear memories of that. That used to be the thing. I mean, in fairness, you know, I'm not progressive, but I have to say the non-smoking indoors thing is a good thing. I find it it's very helpful actually, because I do remember that you'd go in to meet someone in Ireland in a bar or in a, you know, but say particularly a bar, and you literally couldn't see in the you know, you couldn't see very far because the smoke was so thick. Very good film. So it's but it's going well. Everything's going well.
Yeah. Also very funny, you know, we know from our experience, a lot of expats can be very liberal. Definitely, we remember, you know, Bucharest was a lot of liberalism around. But I managed to find, I don't know what you would call it, a nest of American Trump supporters here in Belgrade. So Robert and I, we had a lunch with a nest of US Belgrade-based Trump supporters, a big, long, leisurely lunch on Saturday there, last Saturday from like,
fabulous,
you know, from 1 p.m. to like 5 p.m. just listening to Robert Davi tell us wonderful stories and all the guys. And, you know, one of them, I won't say his name, but one of them, you know, the reason I met these guys was because we knew someone in Romania and we lived there. And this guy is Mexican-American, long hair with a beard, in the film industry, you know, looks like a hippie, looks like a liberal. And he says, you know, it's very interesting. He was telling me how he came to conservatism. He said he was kind of conservative growing up. Then he went off to college, became a liberal. And then he went off and traveled and nothing, you know, he kind of still was liberal. But you remember in Romania, this guy I'll call him John. John started hanging out with the actor Dennis Hopper, became real
I
best
remember
friends
that.
with the actor. I went and stayed over at Dennis Hopper's South Carolina house, stayed at Dennis Hopper's Venice house, became best buddies with Dennis Hopper. And of course, and Dennis Hopper, he says, converted him back to conservatism.
Oh, that's great. I love that. I love those kind of stories. That's really great. We're actually going to go right now to the interview that I did earlier with Robert Bryce. I don't know, Philip, if you're seeing the same headlines as I am, but headlines across the world are warning now of a coming energy crisis, and the headlines are very, very shocking. And I thought no one better in the world to talk to about all of these issues than Robert Bryce. We're going to go over to that right now. Hello, we are now joined by our dear friend Robert Bryce, the commentator, author, documentary filmmaker, and energy expert. Robert Bryce's documentary Juice: How Electricity Explains the World is an absolute must-watch. We will put up, by the way, all the information about how to find it. Welcome, Robert. It's great to have you on again.
Thanks again, and always happy to see you.
Yeah. So I want to start. I don't know. We have a lot to talk about, Robert, but I want to start. I think I sent you, and I think you've been looking at this as well over the weekend. So our friend, the Greenie and New York Times Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist, Thomas Friedman, he wrote an article in 2015 under the headline "Germany, the Green Superpower." And he said, what the Germans have done in converting almost 30% of their electric grid to renewable energy from near zero in about 15 years has been a great contribution to the stability of our planet and its climate. And 6 years later, this last week, he has written under the headline, "A scary energy winter is coming. Don't blame the Greens." And he goes on to talk about lots of stuff which you're going to want to tell me about anyway. What did he get it wrong? What happened here?
Well, and I mean, well, first, let's just lay out what's going on in Europe. The entire continent is in a crisis for not just electricity, but for the supplies of coal, supplies of natural gas. You see utilities across the continent. In fact, one utility in Germany shut down their coal-fired power plant because they didn't have enough coal to fuel the plant. So we can call this energy realism, and this energy Wende that has been underway in Germany has resulted in staggering increases in electricity prices for German consumers. And, you know, while Friedman was holding him up 6 years ago as the object to be copied, what we're seeing today across Europe, and particularly in Britain, is a catastrophe where if we have a cold winter, we could see thousands of people die and freeze to death because they don't have enough energy, and more particularly enough natural gas. And this is the result of this headlong rush toward renewables and the headlong rush away from hydrocarbons. It's that simple, and there is no sugarcoating any part of it. I just was looking at one final point here. The price of electricity in Spain has gone up six-fold in the last year. A six-fold increase, not 6%, not 60%, 600% increase. It's staggering.
You're saying that if we have a cold winter in Europe, and let's just do Europe first, but I also want to immediately pivot back to the United States. But in Europe, you're saying if there's a cold winter in Europe, people will literally freeze to death. Can you just tell me more about that?
Well, I think it's a real possibility. And we've seen, I'm not the only one saying this, but if there isn't enough gas for residential and for business heating, well, how else are people going to heat their homes? They don't have enough natural gas on the island of Britain to meet demand. So how are they going to stay alive if it's a very cold winter? And remember, and it's not just Europe, it's China and India as well. We're looking at a global electricity crisis today in Beirut, in Afghanistan, in China, in India, in Britain, in Germany, in California. I mean, it's spanning the globe. And some of this is clear, and I just can't say it any more plainly than this. It is this headlong rush and this promotion of this all renewable myth that we can run the world on renewable energy alone. Well, what we've seen in Europe is a weeks-long wind energy drought, and that has forced the use of more natural gas, depleted natural gas supplies, and now we're looking at the knock-on effects, and it is damn scary is what it is.
Do you know what's awful about this, Robert? You and I, we were talking about this, forever. Like ever since I've known you, we've had this conversation over many pints of beer. Like we have been talking, I mean, I hate the idea, like, but here we are. Like we're the wisest people in the world, Robert, and apparently the world has been run by idiots. One would have thought that Angela Merkel was like smarter than the average, right? Like, let's just take her for one example. Can you just tell people the completely insane thing that she did?
Well, I mean, what Merkel has done is tied Germany's fortunes to the Russians. And I think it's real politic for the Germans in saying, well, we need the lowest cost natural gas we can find, and the Russians can provide it via the Nord Stream pipeline. I'm assuming this is what you're talking about, but they, you know, it's interesting. You know, the Germans and the Russians don't have a good history, but what we're seeing is the geopolitics of natural gas are changing the world, and they're determining political alliances. And so Germany decided, well, we're going to tie up with the Russians, and the U.S., the Biden administration said, oh, sure, go ahead. I think probably because the Germans, I don't know this for a fact, it's pure speculation on my part, so the Germans told the Biden administration, you know, you can say whatever you want, but we're going forward with this pipeline. And so Vladimir Putin holds I mean, you made this point in Frack Nation that Putin and Russia control the flow of gas into Europe, and they're going to use that as a lever. And what we're seeing that is very clear now.
Let's just stop for one moment and actually watch that part of Frack Nation where we highlighted this brewing problem with natural gas.
James Delingpole is a British journalist and author who has written extensively about energy issues.
Shale gas is the miracle of the early 21st century. In terms of safety and environmental friendliness and economic efficiency, shale gas is about the best thing going in the world right now. And the only reason that shale gas is not developing faster than it is, particularly in Europe, I mean, America, it's already a great success, is because of these disingenuous objections which are being raised by the environmental movement, funded, I would suspect, by, for example, the Russians, who are big producers of natural gas.
So, I mean, and it's interesting in that Friedman article that I referred to earlier, you know, basically we're now in a situation where Vladimir Putin is going to be controlling the fate of European countries. And European countries, I mean, the situation, I think you described the same thing. European countries are going to come cap in hand to Vladimir Putin asking for help. Am I right about that?
Well, I think it's already happened. I mean, and it was interesting the other day, Rosatom, the Russian nuclear agency, put something on Twitter, something to the effect of, oh, well, I guess it took high natural gas prices to the European countries to understand the value of nuclear. I mean, it was the ultimate troll. And what is Germany doing? They're closing their nuclear plants and making themselves more reliant on natural gas. If we could step back for just a second, Anne, what's interesting to me is that I've had a guest on my podcast several times, Meredith Angwin, and she's made this point. She calls it the fatal trifecta. Well, what is the fatal trifecta? It's electric grids that rely too much on imports, too much on natural gas, and too much on renewables. Well, what you look at what she's saying there. What are the power plants that did the best? I'm in Texas. During the blackout, what plants did the best? The coal plants and the nuclear plants. Well, the coal plants and nuclear plants in the U.S. and in Europe are being phased out. So
yes.
They're making their grids, intentionally making their grids more fragile and more prone to failure and more prone to sky-high prices. We're looking at energy poverty across the European continent today that will last for months, if not years.
Let's look at America for a moment here. So I think and we talked about this before, and I just think it's worth looking back again. You actually did have people freeze to death in Texas.
Yeah.
You know, and it should have been a great warning. I mean, it's an extraordinary thing, and more people could have died, as you and our friend, and as our friend, talked about the very same thing. That it was 5 minutes. Apparently, we were 5 minutes away from a complete blackout in the whole of Texas.
That's right.
In Texas, by the way, let's remember where Texas is. One of the
not
richest.
California. That's
right. One of the richest energy, places on the planet Earth. Has Texas learned anything? And if it has, what are they doing to prepare for next winter?
There's a lot going on, right, with the regulators now trying to figure out what to do next. And the legislature passed some measures, but they didn't pass the key measures which would ensure resilience and reliability, in my view. They didn't go far enough. But let me back up for just a second, Ann, and get the context for this, because this is key. So immediately, it's interesting, you mentioned Friedman's column in the New York Times saying, oh, well, don't blame renewables. Essentially, they're hold them harmless. They're not the ones to blame here. We saw the same exact spin happen after the blackouts in Texas in February. New York Times columnist Paul Krugman, Naomi Klein had a piece in the New York Times attributing my piece in Forbes to Rick Perry, of all things. Made a big mistake right in the lead, but anyway, but go ahead. So why did the blackouts happen in Texas? Well, follow the money. It's the oldest maxim in politics. Where was money spent on the Texas grid in the years before the blackout? Was all spent on wind and solar. $66 billion was spent on wind and solar in the state of Texas in the years before the blackouts. And at 2 a.m. on February 15th, when my lights went out, all that spending was effectively worth nothing. All that, that solar and wind was worth zero. And
Robert,
and
yet,
afterward they're saying, don't blame wind and solar.
If this can happen in Texas, though, I find this, I am incredibly disturbed by the blackout in Texas. And I think it got scant attention. And I think the reason it's got scant attention is because it really highlights the problem of this rush to renewables. If this can happen in Texas, Robert, we're really all in trouble. What the hell is going on with politics in Texas that allowed this to happen? A child died, by the way. One of the victims in this nightmare was a child who froze to death. What the hell's going on with politics in Texas? Well,
let me back up here. The death toll ultimately was over 700. And as you pointed out, the Texas grid was, this close. It's such a fraction close to complete meltdown. What could have happened is not just thousands of deaths, but maybe tens of thousands of deaths, because the lights would have gone out in the middle of the night. The roads were impassable. It was snowing sideways, and and the temperatures were falling. So getting the grid back up and running again could have taken weeks. Well, in the meantime, you have in a bitter blizzard, you have the lights go out. We could have seen thousands of people freeze to death. But what's at the root of all of this, Ann, I think, is fundamentally it's a government failure. And you saw, and I had a guest on my podcast, Mark Nelson, just last week. We talked about this. The British deregulated their electricity market in 1998. The deregulation took effect in Texas in 2002. Well, what happens now, almost exactly 20 years, during the same span of a few months, both of them go into crisis. Why? Because the grid was not properly regulated. It was this idea, we'll just leave it to the market. Well, that's great for the wind and solar guys because they can free ride on the existing thermal generators. They don't have to provide power when power is dear. And so what we've seen is this distortion of the electricity markets in Britain, in Texas, in California, with this belief that the market is just going to cure it. No, damn it, no. That's not the way it works. You need the strong hand of government to make sure that the electric grid, which is our most important network, is resilient, reliable, and affordable. And it's all been disappeared. And now we're seeing the knock-on effects that are going to be deadly and incredibly expensive.
I think there's one piece missing from that description you gave there, which is,
sure.
because you're sort of saying that, if the government was in charge, it would be grand if they were regulating the market. The problem is, in a way, they are regulating the market because they're making the free market not free at all. They're actually favoring renewables. So
Absolutely.
People are trying to make a living. These utility companies are trying to make a living. So they're going to choose to buy electricity. They're going to buy energy from the place where they can make a buck or whatever. That's fair enough. They've got a bottom line. But governments are favoring renewables. Governments aren't saying to these utilities, you'd correct me, but you're the expert. Governments should be saying to utilities, we will finish you. We will destroy you if you are not able to constantly supply the people, no matter what. I don't even know, we don't care how you do it. We just want you to know. And that's not what they're doing. They're not saying that. They're not giving a free hand. Is that not correct?
Well, I see where you're going, and yes, I agree that what happened in Texas after the blackouts, the buck doesn't stop anywhere. No one's held accountable. Oh, well, the market didn't work. Well, it was because the way the government set up the market, it completely distorted the market to the favor of solar and wind. So I've written about this many times and spoken about it many times. You look at the federal subsidies for solar and wind on a per unit of energy produced basis, solar gets 250 times as much in federal tax incentives in the U.S. as the nuclear sector does. The wind energy sector, 160 times. So even in the wake of the blackouts here in ERCOT, what's being built in the state? All solar and all wind, not a single drop of thermal generation. But to bring this back to what's going on in Europe, I think that, this is an example of how this all renewable nonsense, and that's what it is being promoted by some of the most powerful environmental groups in America, some of the most powerful environmental groups in Europe. And you even hear the head of the EU Commission then promoting renewables as the disaster is unfolding, saying, oh, well, the price of gas has gone up, but the price of renewables are, they're still stable. Well, that's fine, but what if the wind doesn't blow? Well, you can call any price you want, but it's a time of, I have to say, of deception that the public has to get over and understand the criticality of the electric network and to keep electricity affordable, resilient, and reliable. And that's been lost in this push for decarbonization. I think that at the very heart of this, I think this is a very, very important point, and one that I became painfully aware of when I started to study the energy sector and started making documentaries about it, was, people's complete ignorance about where the electricity comes from. I would say to our viewers and our listeners right now, do you have any idea how the lights are going on in your house? I mean, people know the lights go on, but I would say most of the people listening, now our viewers and listeners are more educated than the average, but a lot of people do not know what's powering their house, what's powering their power shower. Is it coal? Is it natural gas? Is it renewables? And I would say people in California, etc., would be quite surprised at the mix. They think that, they have this foolish idea that electricity is clean, that it's just, it's very clean. I've got an electric car. Yeah, where's the electricity coming from? I'd love you to speak to that issue just for a moment, the issue of people's complete ignorance. And I don't mean it in an insulting way, but there seems to be an incredible ignorance in most people on the energy issue and specifically electricity. There's no doubt. And part of that is that electricity systems are complicated. I mean, the electric grid is a very complex system, and you have thousands upon thousands of different generation units and toasters and lights and microphones all connected to it. So, in general, I say this with no fear of contradiction, the public is scientifically illiterate and they're innumerate. And so they think, oh, well, renewables has got to be good. Well, when you do it at scale, you can harm the integrity and reliability of the electric grid. And that's what we've seen. And, you mentioned California. I mean, I live in Texas, and I'm not, I'm from Oklahoma. I'm not just bashing California, but you want a case study in what not to do? Look at what's going on in California. The electricity rates are skyrocketing, and they're following the German model. I mean, it's as though they're lemmings when it comes to these energy policies. And, we're going to do what the Germans and Europeans were. And we see that in California, where you have some of the highest electricity prices in the continental U.S. And just in the last few weeks, what has happened? They added 150 megawatts of new gas-fired generation. Oh, well, I thought you were decarbonizing. Oh, and you're going to close your last nuclear plant, the Diablo Canyon plant, beginning in 2024. That's 10% of all the electricity produced in the state, and it's zero carbon, and they're going to close it anyway. Why? Because groups like the Natural Resources Defense Council, which, by the way, got $100 million from Jeff Bezos, have been pushing for this for years. And one final point, I just was looking at some data from the California Independent System Operator. In the last year alone, in the Bay Area, the number of diesel-fired gensets in that region went up 22% in 1 year. So follow the money. Where are people investing? They're looking at the grid and seeing it's less reliable, so they're adding their own generators. And this is happening across the country.
It's interesting that you say that, just on a personal note, actually, by the way, because Ireland, is a case study in idiocy. It's really unbelievable what's happening there. And we're becoming really, really, we have a home there, and we spend time there in the winter, sometime in the winter and sometime in the summer. And we're becoming painfully aware of this unreliability of the grid, and they're already saying it. The guy in charge of energy in Ireland, Eamon Ryan, is telling people to prepare for blackouts. He's saying, the idea that he's in charge of the grid is extremely scary, but he's basically saying, yeah, prepare for blackouts. So everyone's out there buying generators now. We're going way backwards here. Everyone is buying generators so that we don't freeze to death. And I don't know if I mentioned this to you, and I don't know if you know this, but another crazy thing in Ireland, if you build a new house in Ireland, you're not allowed to have a fireplace.
Yeah, well, this is part of the anti-hydrocarbon, anti-solid fuel push that the all renewable crowd is pushing. I mean, it's not just bad policy, Anne. It's dangerous policy. I mean,
people? I mean, this is going to sound like a really strange question, but I mean, are the people pushing renewables? I mean, not to be insulting or anything, are they that stupid? Are they that stupid that they would put tens of thousands of people's lives in danger? Are they that ideologically blind and that innumerate and illiterate about science that they would do this?
I'll answer it this way. And I wrote a piece that was published in Forbes just a few days ago about the Sierra Club, and this is related, but the headline was, here's the list of 317 communities that have rejected wind energy that the Sierra Club doesn't want you to see. And in there, I talk about the Sierra Club. And by the way, that number is now over 320 in the U.S. This idea, we'll do all this renewables. It's exactly the same in Britain, exactly the same in Germany, France. The people in the rural areas and the countryside are saying, we don't want your stupid wind turbines. You can take your wind turbines and put them where the sun doesn't shine, and maybe next to your solar panels. But all across the country, large wind and solar projects are being rejected. This summer alone, in Montana, in Pennsylvania, and Nevada, very large solar projects were rejected by local communities.
Oh, I'm really happy to hear that. That's a great piece. You'll send us a link for that, and we'll put that up in the show notes. That's an incredibly interesting story, Robert. And people have, I really like that. So the people are smart. The leaders.
The people are smart, but I'll just finish this.
Yes.
About your question about why are these groups pushing it? Well, I was talking to this guy who was a prominent employee of the Sierra Club, and I sent him my study that I published in April, delineating all of these rejections. The spreadsheet with all the URLs here. You can check the news link yourself. This is the documentation. Never replied. Sent it again. No reply. But he said something interesting, and this is the point that I was getting to. These groups they're campaigning organizations. They're campaigners, and their only focus is the campaign. Did we achieve the goal of banning natural gas in homes in California? Well, yes, you've done a pretty good job. You already got 50 or so, some of the richest communities in California, banning the use of natural gas. In Ireland, banning the use of stoves in homes, making them all electric. They don't have to run anything. All they have to do is do the next campaign, because then they get another check from Jeff Bezos. Our campaign was successful. So They don't give a thin god about running things or managing things. They're just campaigners, and that's all they are. And therein lies the critical difference, because this making the energy and power networks function and make them affordable, resilient, and reliable is damn hard. And anything that does, they get degraded. It's just a little bit. It's just a little bit. And we're going to save the climate. It's just a little bit. Well, that leads to ruin over time. And that's what we're starting to see. And the bills are going to be just enormous. I mean, as I said, in Spain, in 1 year, the price of electricity has gone up 600%. It's staggering. I've
been looking at those numbers about energy prices all over the globe, by the way, and everything is at a premium. The prices have gone completely nuts. Just to stick just with the question of Texas and more in general in the United States. Can you point me to any politicians in the United States who are talking about this with the urgency that is necessary and the urgency that we're hearing in your voice? Who else is talking about this? What politicians are?
I wish I could tell you, Anne. I think there are a few members.
That's really disappointing, by the way, Robert. You're in Texas. Texas politicians aren't talking about this continuously. That's scary. I
think some of them are. I think, John Barrasso is the ranking member of the Senate Energy Committee. I think there's some clear-eyed analysts, and they're all on the Republican side. And unfortunately, what I see too, despite what we've seen and the ongoing blackouts in California, the deadly blackout here in Texas, and these ongoing catastrophes in Europe, it hasn't changed the rhetoric. I mean, whether from the EU or from Bernie Sanders or, some of the ranking Democrats on Capitol Hill are saying, still, we got to, push renewables. Look at what is happening. Are you not paying attention? I mean, if you were, you would really be changing your tune. And that's the part that I think is deeply dangerous, is that the reality is not affecting the rhetoric. And therein lies really a real problem, because what we're seeing is overinvestment in renewables and underinvestment in hydrocarbons. And I mean, truly, now some of these are knock-on effects from COVID, no doubt about it. But just look at hydrocarbons. In particular, let's look at natural gas. We talked about it earlier as a heating fuel and how critical that's going to be this winter rather, forgive me. But the issue also is natural gas for petrochemical production and fertilizer production. The natural gas is critical for is one of the main sources of energy for producing ammonium-based fertilizers. Well, if farmers don't have enough fertilizer to grow their crops, then what happens? Well, you don't produce enough food. So we're going to see inflationary effects throughout the economy because of this headlong rush through ESG and, hydrocarbons are bad, climate change. Well, it's a misunderstanding of the staggering volume of hydrocarbons that we consume and how they touch nearly every aspect of our lives. And that's the critical point. And those chickens, unfortunately, are going to be coming home to roost, and it's going to be an extremely expensive lesson for consumers all around the world.
It's very scary. I'm looking at these headlines and it's very scary. And the piece you just wrote a piece recently for Forbes, and I want to quote a couple of pieces back to you and make a couple of comments there. So in this last piece in Forbes, and we'll put it up in the notes, you said, the iron law of electricity, which says people, businesses and countries will do whatever they have to do to get the electricity they need. I would put to that, what of countries that have totally drunk, countries and states that have drunk the Kool-Aid?
Well, it's Germany and Britain are the obvious ones. I mean, imagine where Britain would be today if they had embraced hydraulic fracturing, a decade ago. Now, Britain has sizable shale resources that they could be tapping to produce their own natural gas. They didn't do it. And there was this belief, and it's same in Germany, we'll do it with renewables. Well, what happens when the wind doesn't blow in the North Sea? And that's what we've seen over the past month or so. A record low wind activity in the North Sea. And it destroys this lie, and call it what it is, a lie by the all renewable crowd. The wind is always blowing somewhere. Well, hey, guess what? That's not true. And when it doesn't blow and you put all this money into it, the knock-on effects become just disastrous. But I think, just to zoom out just a second, and because we talked about Europe and the U.S., in India, something like half of the thermal power stations, 70% of the electricity in India, 70% in China, is produced from coal. Well, in India, something like half of the coal stations in the country are now effectively out of coal on hand. So you have a country of 1.4 billion people that's going to be running short of electricity and have rolling blackouts potentially for weeks, if not months. This is going to affect the global economy for lack of production, manufacturing, people put out of work because there's no electricity. It's damn scary is what it is.
What happened to coal? I'm just thinking on the China front, because China, for many, many years certainly paid lip service to the global warming hysteria and the anti-fossil fuel thing. But have they got involved in this then? And how have they got themselves in this situation with the coal?
Well, I think some of it is that their power demand skyrocketed after COVID. The lockdowns slowed. So they saw double-digit increases in electricity demand, and the same occurred in India as well. So you have these massive increases in demand for power, and they're burning coal to produce it, but then they start running short of coal in part because their mines weren't producing as much during COVID. And then you've got transportation bottlenecks from the rail lines, et cetera. So it exposes the delicate and interrelated nature of the energy and power networks and how they have to function together. And so it's deeply unfortunate, but these knock-on effects we're going to see an inflationary cycle because of the increased cost of electricity that's going to translate into higher costs for aluminum, for, canned beer, for, wheat, everything. All of this is going to be touched by this headlong rush and ESG to condemnation of hydrocarbons and embrace of renewables. Well, it's going to come with a very high cost. And, people like BlackRock and Larry Fink and, climate change. Look, climate change is a concern. It's not the only concern.
Mm-hmm. How are the greenies spinning this crisis?
Well, it's the same that they did after the Texas blackouts. Well, we just need more renewables. The problem is, we just need more renewables. Well, but again, this beggars the idea, where are you going to make this stuff happen? Where are you going to put it? Because you can't build wind turbines in California. That's clear. I've written about that. I mentioned it in the Iron Law in the piece that I had in Forbes on the Sierra Club. You can't build them in New York State. In some of the most democratic states in America, you can't build large wind projects. So this idea, I mean, they're just reverting to the same, baloney claims that, we'll just do it all with renewables. But it doesn't. It just ignores the importance of affordability, and it ignores the impact that all of this is having on the low and middle income consumers. And they're going to be the ones that take it in the shorts, not those wealthy people living in San Francisco and doing their campaigns. That doesn't affect them. They're like, we achieved the campaign, so all is good.
It's very, very worrying. And as you say, I mean, it's, poorer countries and poorer communities are going to be, disproportionately affected by this. You've one of the other laws you have that you talk about in the Forbes pieces, you says, I've also stated, you say, when forced to choose between dirty electricity and no electricity, people will choose dirty electricity every time. I would make a caveat to that, that except for in idiotic places like the place, unfortunately, where I'm living, where they won't choose dirty electricity here, even if we die. Am I not right about that?
I have to go back to the class issue, and because, the people that can afford backup generators. I had a piece in the Wall Street Journal a few weeks ago in which I talked about the sales of Generac. Generac sales are up, they've doubled. The stock price is up fourfold. Why? Because people are seeing the lack of reliability in their electric grid. And where are Generac's most promising markets? California and Texas, right?
Oh my God.
And who buys the Generacs? Well, the average household income for the Generac consumer is $130,000. That's 2 times the national median household income.
Oh my God, that's a fabulous factoid.
So you have this bifurcation of the market where the wealthy are not going to be hurt as badly, not nearly as badly, by blackouts. They're not going to be hurt as badly by rising prices. They're going to be able to absorb it. They're going to have a Generac. They're going to have a Tesla Powerwall. But I was in Louisiana. Tyson Culver, my colleague, and I are working on another documentary. We drove over to southern Louisiana. What are people there doing? They're carrying those 5-gallon gas cans. Those are Tesla Powerwalls for poor people, and they're running small generators to fuel to power their refrigerator, to power their air conditioning unit, and that's how they're scraping by when the lights go out. And that's just the reality. And it's all about class. It's always about class, but particularly when it comes to energy, this is the issue that I care about, and I'm going to be talking about for a long time to come.
Yeah, and I hope we'll be talking to you about it. One other issue I just wanted to touch on before we finish on energy, and I have another thing I want to talk to you about before we finish. Your Forbes piece speaks about nuclear, and I know that your guest on your last on the podcast, and we'll put up the links to your podcast. We highly recommend Robert's podcast if you want to know anything about energy. This is the guy you want to talk to. And you talk about nuclear, and I've a sort of a nuanced question for you on that. So nuclear, really there's not much happening in the United States about nuclear. There's not much happening with nuclear almost anywhere. And I would ascribe a lot of the failure for ramping up nuclear on a movie, 2 movies back in the day. Silkwood, China Syndrome, and more recently, Chernobyl, have been very, very powerful tools to the public to basically give a very clear message. Nuclear power will kill us all, and we'll all die horrible, slow, painful deaths.
Right.
What is the nuclear industry doing to answer all that?
I mean, how long do we have?
I know this is a huge issue, and it's not funny at all. Unfortunately,
it is. And frankly, the nuclear industry in the U.S. is struggling mightily, and coal and fire and nuclear plants are being shuttered. One of the great travesties of 2020 was the closure of the Indian Point nuclear plant in Buchanan, New York, which we featured in our film Juice. I went there 3 years ago. It was a marvel of technology. From 1 square kilometer, they were producing 25% of all the electricity used in the city of New York. I mean, just incredible example of power density. And yet they closed it. Why? Because the Natural Resources Defense Council lobbied for it, and Governor Andrew Cuomo cheered it on. Oh, well, we'll just replace it all with renewables. And and what happened? Instead, they replaced that output with gas-fired generation. But there's this fear that the left has used for decades about nuclear. They've conflated it with nuclear weaponry repeatedly, and also they throw out continually this canard. Oh, we don't need nuclear. We can do it all with renewables. So the nuclear industry in the U.S. is stuck. I mean, let's be clear. They're stuck. And Mark Nelson and some of his colleagues, Matty Cherwinski at the Campaign for a Green Nuclear Deal, they prevented the closure of 2 nuclear plants in Illinois, the Byron and Dresden plants, which was a great accomplishment for them. But we're still facing the closure of Diablo Canyon. There are a lot of new nuclear technologies that are being developed on small modular reactors, high temperature reactors, molten salt, thorium, et cetera. All of them show promise, but they're a decade or more away from deployment at scale, and therein lies one of the big problems. So, as I say at the end of the piece on the iron law of electricity, over the next decade or so, we don't have a choice. To meet electricity demand, we're going to have to use coal, oil, and natural gas, and a lot of it.
Yeah. It's extraordinary. I mean, as I said, we could talk to you forever. I want to segue, just do a very quick segue
Sure.
Away from, because we could talk about energy forever. So I think I mentioned to you in my last correspondence, Robert, that yes, Phelim and I are thinking we might move to Austin. Why should people move to Austin? Should we move to Austin?
No, stay away. Everyone, don't come. No, we're full.
What's life like in Austin, Texas?
Well, I've lived here for 36 years. I love it here, obviously. And, I'm lucky we bought our house 20 years ago. But, I mean, the price of housing is skyrocketing because, Tesla announced they're moving their headquarters here. Numerous other tech firms are moving their headquarters here. I mean, it's a great city. I love it here. I went out and heard live music last night, had a great time, went bird watching yesterday. I love it here. So, but I mean, the city has changed dramatically in the last 10 years or so. A lot of young people moving here, and I understand why. No income tax, relatively low regulatory burden. And my son was selling shoes on South Congress until a few weeks ago. He said, I said, well, who are your customers? He said, they're all from California or Dallas.
Yeah, I think so. And what's the property tax there?
They're high. I mean, we don't have a state income tax, so you pay a lot in property taxes. But they're limited to increase, I think, 10% a year. So, I mean, it's not quite, the same.
But they increase every year by 10%, the property tax?
That is the limit. They're limited to no more than 10%. But,
oh my God.
But the price of the cost of living here is going up dramatically because the cost of housing has gone up so dramatically. I think in our neighborhood, not bragging, but last year alone, I think the value of housing prices in our neighborhood here in South Austin went up 30 or 40% in 1 year.
Yes.
So it's a very, very hot market. And so if you're coming, shop well because the demand is incredible because so many people are leaving California.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's going to be, I was talking to Phelim about it recently. He was saying, America is becoming increasingly Balkanized. And, maybe that's a good thing, right? Maybe that's a kind of a good thing. He quotes Mark Stein. Mark Stein said, this line, diversity is our strength. And he said, it's exactly the opposite, actually. The lack of diversity is our strength. When we all agree on certain things, on certain principles about how to live and how to behave properly, things do well. But if you bring in people who think very, very differently and have very bad ideas, things don't go very well. But anyway, we'll see. We are checking out Austin. We are checking out some other places, and we asked our viewers and listeners to send us their suggestions of where we should leave, because California has really, Gavin Newsom now with getting this sort of second booster mandate is just he's just like a child with a toy now. He's just getting, anything he wants. He's just doing it.
Well,
the
just
crazier,
on the
the
energy
better.
front, I can't answer to all those issues, but on the energy front, the situation in California is just getting worse and worse and worse. And the electricity prices there are going to continue up. I mean, the California Public Utility Commission issued a report not long ago estimating that San Diego Gas and Electric, their rates are going to go up another 40 or 50% over this decade. So, I mean, the cost of living there is extraordinarily high. The cost of housing is extraordinarily high. And it's in a state where you have the highest poverty rate in America. I mean, it's just an incredible confluence of interests, and a lot of it being pushed by the same groups that we've been talking about: the Sierra Club, the Natural Resource Defense Council, limiting growth, limiting the ability of people to own homes, and it's a bad outcome, and it's a bad outcome, particularly for the Latinos in California. I've written about that a lot as well. They're suing the state over these policies, but it's regressive and just not fair, and the state is going to have to reckon with this for decades to come.
Yeah. We'll be talking to you again, Robert, as we get closer to the winter, and particularly the winter in Europe, and watching what happens there, and obviously watching what happens in Texas. But thank you so much for your time today. It's always great to talk to you. Never enough time, Robert, but we will be checking in more regularly as time goes on, and maybe see you in Austin.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thanks a million, Ann.
What an incredible, I mean, I could have talked to Robert forever. One thing I want to do right now and really highly recommend to everyone is Robert's work is very, very educational. And I'm thinking of a lot of parents out there who are now homeschooling children. You would do a lot worse than to do this one thing with your kids right now. So on Roku, and we'll put the link up in our show notes, Robert's last documentary, which is called Juice: How Electricity Explains the World. I cannot possibly recommend it enough. I think one of the reasons, and I think I didn't really get into it during the interview with Robert, but one of the reasons I think we're in the trouble that we're in is people are so illiterate about energy issues. And I know that because I was that person until I started working and on the documentaries that Phelim and I have made on electricity and about environmentalism, about the global climate, hysteria and all of that. And you start to realize the importance of energy, the importance of electricity, and where is the power coming to keep the lights on. So please go right now and make it your business to bring your family together and to bring your friends together and watch Robert's documentary. And by the way, as he mentioned at the very end of our piece, he is working on a new documentary, which I imagine will be wonderful.
Just on a related note, I went to the Nikola Tesla Museum here in Belgrade yesterday, in fact, and they're trying to imply that Tesla was some kind of environmentalist. There's definitely and he did write an article about the problems with unlimited energy, right? But it's a book, it's a pamphlet, it's a long pamphlet, and I bought it. I'm just started reading it, but I suspect it's not what they said it was, And there was a quote of his which I think they're trying to attach to consumerism or make it anti-consumerist, but I think it's anti-fascist. So I think the piece is anti-fascist rather than anti-people. But let me have a look at that. But they're definitely, the energy is under threat across the world. The Greens are getting their wish.
The sale of generators has gone completely through the roof. And what's extraordinary is basically he made the point that when push comes to shove, people need energy and they'll get it from wherever they can get it, including what's known as dirty sources, including diesel. So he said companies that produce these generators, so the rich and the elite who bring in these awful rules and regulations and have us in this incredible poverty, energy poverty, that have us in this situation where we're really vulnerable and the lights are going to go out. Those same people, when the lights go out, they're really wealthy. They're just going to buy a diesel-powered generator and keep the lights on and the heat on in their own house. And I know Phelim and I have had this conversation. We have a little home in Ireland and we go there every now and again, and we go there sometimes in the winter. And we are actually literally looking at what kind of generator can we afford to buy, because this is the thing that people are doing. And I was talking to a friend in Ireland this weekend and saying to her, and she had mentioned that she'd just driven past somewhere and she saw coal. And I said to her, get them to fill the car up. Don't worry about how you're going to get it out of the car. Get them to fill the car up with coal, but tell them, and I remember my father was a coal merchant back in the day, so I know a little bit about this. Get the Polish coal. And Magda was laughing today when I was saying that. But get the Polish coal, he always said, because it had, and I'm trying to remember the measure, maybe Magda will find it for me there on the interwebs, but there's a measurement on coal. And that measurement is the one that is telling you how much heat the coal gives out. The difference between coal and wood, and obviously we all love burning wood. I love to burn wood, but it goes like just that. It's gone. Coal, however, gives out extraordinary heat and it stays for a long time. And it's a fabulous source of heat. And I said that when we get to Ireland, Phelim, if we're going there in the winter, the Christmas time, that we will fill up every possible part of that house that we have with coal, store coal, because this is coming to a town near you, and don't get yourself caught without some kind of power source that you control and that no one can turn off. That you can control and try, but it's very frightening.
Well, I mean, I think we're going to mention this at the end. I mean, Gavin Newsom is in the middle of banning generators powered by dirty. You can only have generators powered by electricity.
Oh yeah,
so,
but again, he's stupid enough. But again, and I mentioned this when I was talking to Robert. Again, he's stupid enough to think that electricity is clean. You know, the question is, what's powering the electricity? And we know that here in California, you know, these so-called dirty fuels are what's keeping everything going, including the electric cars, by the way. And, you know, this is the kind of exercise people should be forced. And this is why I say parents should watch the documentary and have the conversation with their children about energy, about the importance of energy and what happens when the lights go out. And we know now, unfortunately, we have a petri dish because we saw what happened in Texas this past winter when people died. Robert said the estimate now is 700, including children.
Wow.
So we're moving on from that, because one of the reasons, of course, that this has all happened is because journalism is so dishonest. But very funny, you know. I mean, we've done this. I think I don't know. This is nearly a feature now at this point. Film is doing kind of journalism 101, but how not to do journalism. And there's so many very powerful examples. And we have two this week, one from the New York Times and one from the Washington Post. And the one from the New York Times is just magnificent. And the woman in the New York Times, she's 𝙈𝙤𝙤 𝙃𝙪𝙣. Looking at her photograph, everyone looking at her photograph there. She is a reporter focusing on science and global health. She is the 2019 winner of the Victor Cohen Prize for excellence in medical science reporting. So this little lady, 𝙈𝙤𝙤, had to issue a correction in the New York Times. And the correction in the New York Times basically is a correction on every last thing she said in the article. This woman who won a prize for excellence. So one of the things, and the central error, but it's one of many, but I suppose the most egregious, is that she had reported that 900,000 children had been hospitalized with COVID during the pandemic. The actual figure is 63,000. Right? And I mean, you're a journalist, Phelim. I'm a journalist. You know, and we haven't won a prize, Phelim, but you know, maybe that's something that we should boast about, because the one thing that you'd always check in your article, like you would check over and over again, would be a statistic, particularly a number or a statistic that is so dramatic. Almost 1 million children hospitalized in a country with about 300 million people living in it. This is a huge number. But you know what happened here? And I know you explained this to me a lot, Phelim, but you know, basically, if you love a story so much, the last thing you'd ever want to do is fact check it. Oh yeah.
And you know, it just also, by the way, I'm looking at that correction now. It's going to get to the stage where the correction is bigger than the original article.
Yes.
And you know, by the way, even that 60,000 children.
Oh yeah, I know. I question that too. Yes.
I would question that, but I also would say, well, can you tell us how many children are hospitalized during a bad flu season or during a good flu season?
Correct. Context.
And I don't know how many it is. I don't know how many it is. But the fact that they don't tell you how many it is means they know how many it is, and it possibly is
ruins
more
the story.
Less.
It ruins the story. It ruins the panic porn. It ruins the doom scrolling. It ruins the COVID's going to get us in the end, and that you need to now have your child, your baby, vaccinated, and all the rest of it. Like literally, there are, I don't know, there's 10 errors, I think, in it. Literally, I think she got nothing right, you know. An earlier version of this article incorrectly described actions taken by regulators in Sweden and Denmark, was one of the things. Then there was the 63,000 people. It also, in addition, the article misstated the timing of an FDA meeting. Like it's on and on and on and on and on. And this is a woman who won a prize for excellence. Yeah. But then, quickly segueing from that one, just not to even spend too much time on it, it's just hysterical. The Washington Post, the very same again. And it's one of those things again where they're married to the narrative. They love the narrative. So the narrative was, and people will remember this Kenosha police officer shooting. So Jacob Blake, unarmed, no charges to be filed against Kenosha police officer. And now they've had to issue an apology, the Washington Post. So when the story was originally reported, the original story was unarmed man shot by the police. unarmed man, unarmed man. Now, it's interesting, Phelim, and I know you worked in in a war zone, right? So people got shot, terrible things happened to them, and you would go and try and get to the bottom of what exactly had happened. And I can imagine, Phelim, I'm going to put a scenario to you and to ask you how you would have behaved. So I imagine when you were in Belfast and somebody got shot or whatever, you would have gone somewhere and you'd have said, you'd have started maybe by talking to the family, maybe the family of the guy who had died, maybe. Yeah. You'd have said, what happened here? And perhaps let's imagine that the family said to you, he was unarmed, he was walking, he just got shot out of the blue. What would you have done then, Phelim? Would you have just gone, you'd have gone straight back? Would you go straight back to the newsroom, Phelim, and write that up then? Would you?
No, actually, what you go do is you go and ask eyewitnesses who were there. You ask the police who shot them, and you go, but and you ask local people. And this idea of taking the family's word for anything, right? They are the world's most unreliable witnesses, and I don't mean that in a bad way, right?
Yes. Yes.
Of course you're an unreliable witness. Your child has just been shot. You're not thinking straight. And if you weren't there, you're doubly not reliable, right? So, obviously what you say is relevant for emotion. You can talk a little bit about your child, but every mother thinks their child is a saint, So, but then there are independent sources you can verify what was the truth about this person, but you would never take the word of a family and just run with it.
Well, Washington Post, Phelim, I think, what is their motto? Democracy dies in the dark. Is that them?
Yes.
Democracy dies in the dark. Well, I don't know about democracy dying in the dark, but I'll tell you one thing we do know for sure about the Washington Post. They're despicable and useless, incompetent journalists. And here's how we know. They went ahead, they talked to the family of the man who had been shot, and they went ahead and they tweeted out, unarmed man.
Yeah, but
by the way, how incendiary is that?
Hold on. Yeah. So, but this has been out for years now that he was armed, that he had a knife. This is not, it's not like they're, at the time, and there's even footage of him with the knife. So the family said he was unarmed, according to the journalist, and they tweeted that out. But there's a thing, as I say, there's a thing that top secret journalists can use, and it's a thing called Google. And you can actually Google his name and find that there's a picture of him with a knife, and him refusing to put the knife down, and then him reaching into a car. And that's when cops get really nervous, when armed people who refuse to put a knife down reach into a car. That's when they are going for a gun, and there's many examples of that. So that's the state of journalism now in America.
Yep, there you go. So obviously, Phelim, you're there in Belgrade. You're making a movie about Hunter Biden, and we have some news about Hunter Biden. It's really not what you know, right? In this life, it seems to be it's not what you know, but it's who you know and who you are.
Tell me this story. You're over there. Tell me this story.
This is fabulous, and this is from the Daily Mail, and I just give you the headline here. The art of the COVID deal. The gallery selling Hunter Biden's paintings saw their federal COVID-19 loan increase from $150,000 to $500,000 after Hunter Biden's father took office. So basically, isn't that fabulous? So the public records show that the George Berge Gallery in Soho, we've mentioned the George Berge Gallery before, because obviously that's where the home of the Hunter Biden art work is located. So public records show that the George Berge Gallery in Soho, New York, was granted a $150,000 COVID-19 disaster loan a year ago, last year, so 2020. However, 6 months after Joe Biden took office, so in 2021, this figure, the 120, which was what they got the previous year, was amended, revised, and the company was awarded $350,000 more, so coming to a grand total of $500,000 in their disaster relief. So I think the George Berge Art Gallery made some smart moves there. They may not be a great assessor of great art, but maybe they're a great assessor of great associates or great people to be associated with, right?
They know who to be associated with. Yeah, and Hunter, of course, has had his exhibition in LA, and the great and the good and the not so good were there. Eric Garcetti was there, who's now going off to be the ambassador to India.
Correct.
And a donor to the Joe Biden campaign. I mean, this thing stinks to high heaven.
Oh, and by the way, just a little detail film about the exhibition they had here. I think you probably know this, but they did have the exhibition in here, and people I think already know this, that 3 prints were sold. Prints, mind you, prints. Were sold for $75,000. I mean, this is really ghastly. However, the other thing just to mention, just while we're there, was it was an indoor event in the city of Los Angeles, and no one wore a mask in contravention of all of the city mandates. But
there's Hunter without his mask. There's Hunter without his mask, and he doesn't look like he's using drugs at all in that picture.
Right.
As I was saying, that we're trying to make our budget fit our imagination. So I know people have been very generous, but please keep giving. And if you haven't given, please give. We're here. We're spending money. It's a very, very professional team. They're all very young and very enthusiastic. And, I'm sure some of them may not agree with the subject matter, but there's no sense of that. It's just, how can we make this the best piece of art there is? And, one of the ways we can do that is to spend more money. Is to have, at the moment, I'm saying to Robert, look, if you want that big set piece, then we're going to have to sacrifice something else. And he's very good. He knows that, and he's happy to focus on some really good, strong pieces. So please give what you can. Help us make the best movie. Help us tell the best truth. Get the truth out in the most entertaining, most accessible way. Go to mysonhunter.com. Give what you can. People have given $10, they've given $100, they've given $1,000, they've given more. So please give what you can. Give $10,000 if you want, and let's get this movie made and make it professional.
Moving swiftly along, because we're going to be hearing a lot about Hunter Biden over the next little while. Tell us about the Nobel Prize for Literature film. I know that caught your eye today.
It just, look, the Nobel Prize, ever since, I think probably since they awarded it to Obama, it's really not worth the paper it's written on. Author of 10 novels, 𝙈𝙤𝙤 𝙃𝙪𝙤𝙣 explores the effects of colonialism and the plight of refugees. And it's like, whatever happened to great literature? And next week, I want to do a thing on the MacArthur Genius Prize. I want to go through that. That is a joke now. That is just, it's like it reminds me actually of the Academy, the Oscar Academy, where when they wanted to let make people more diverse, they let documentary filmmakers in who I'd never heard of. I'd never heard of anything. They let filmmakers in who last had a film in 2013. They were just anything for diversity, and it's the same with the Hollywood Foreign Press Association. They're trying to please the woke gods. They're trying to make their ranks more diverse, and they're diluting. Well, actually, the Hollywood Foreign Press Association is a very interesting story. We should do that next week as well, because they should have let more people in over the years and didn't, because of whatever you want to call it, protectionism. You could call it racism. It's not actually racism, but it's protectionism, and it's now go back to bite them. But I want to move on to Anne McElhinney and Phelim McAleer versus the city of Santa Monica.
Oh, God. And can I just say, Phelim, everyone I tell about this story, everyone says, yeah, you don't win against the city of Santa Monica. But I know, Phelim, you love to fight. He's from Northern Ireland. You see, this is what happens. So tell us, Phelim, what's the latest? There's been a development. Is that what you're telling me?
There has been a development, yes. There has.
And I don't know this. I'm hearing this for the first time, by the way.
So, like the great Neville Chamberlain, I have in my hand a piece of paper that means not so much peace in our time, more like war in our time. So I wrote to the city of Santa Monica, as people will know, we'll see the photographs now, and tripped on a pavement outside the court of Santa Monica, Superior Court of California. And I wrote to them and said, please preserve all videos, all security footage of the around the courthouse. Please preserve all documentation relating to this particular pavement, because I noticed that you've ground it down, because obviously something's happened there before. I noticed there's been work done on it. I demand, j'accuse, and as you know, we have a lawyer friend who is a very wealthy man and charges a lot for his legal fees. And I swear to God, I got him this, maybe I mentioned this last week, we got him this wonderful birthday present, right?
Yes.
And it's quite a special birthday present. But me reading this letter to him was a better present than that.
I would seriously dispute that. But moving right along.
No, he got much amusement out of it. Actually, and he was very good. He said, they're wrong. So basically, I asked for all video recordings of the area. This is from 𝙎𝙤𝙤𝙃𝙪𝙣 Court Counsel of the Superior Court of California, County of Los Angeles, 111 North Hill Street, Los Angeles. So she said, you asked for all video. Dear Mr. McAleer, on September 20th, 2021, we received your undated written request. I didn't date it. I can't believe that. Anyway, seeking preservation and production of records related to an incident in which you allege your wife sustained an injury outside the Santa Monica courthouse.
No allege about it, by the way. That's kind of insulting, by the way.
Well, actually,
who do this?
Your letters were forwarded to me for response. Your requests and the court responses are set forth below. You'll ask for all video recordings of the area for the whole day. The court is not the custodian of the records sought. The video monitoring system of the court are under the control of the sheriff, and any recordings are the custody of the sheriff. To request, you must blah, blah, blah. And then he said, even if the court were the custodians, the records sought are exempt from disclosure because they pertain to an anticipated claim or litigation to which a judicial branch entity is a party. California Rules of Court, Rule 10.500, brackets F, brackets 2, close brackets. I have along good legal advice, and this is basically their answer, is we can't give you these records because they pertain to potential litigation. I have it from good, and I asked also from any records, previous claims, any records of damage, any records of repairs, any records of anything connected to this particular part of the thing. And I have it on good legal advice that is nonsense. That just because, the city of Santa Monica gets sued 100 times a week, I'm sure, for different reasons. So that would basically close the Freedom of Information Act for the whole of Santa Monica, because everything is potential litigation when you think about it. So
you're saying,
I'm saying j'accuse, and you're wrong, Madam 𝙎𝙤𝙤𝙃𝙪𝙣. I'm going to write back to her and say, look, you can't. Everything is every document that you have is part of a potential litigant. You cannot
exclude certain ones because whatever.
You can't get around the Freedom of Information Act, which is a legal statutory legal requirement.
I have this I'm just after having a kind of a, like what if, that presentiment or whatever. I almost feel like I can see into the future. I feel like we're going to be like on two Zimmer frames in our 90s, and you're going to be saying, the Santa Monica courthouse just got in touch, and I'll be saying, what? I can't hear you. So yes, Phil, moving on. Let's just leave that. I think you and I need to have a talk, because I don't think I want you to spend all your free time doing this, although if this is what you want to have as a hobby. By the way, I want to mention to you, Phil, by the way, that Top Cat is he has to be beside me all the time now, but I'm trying to get him to not jump up on things. And before the next time we have a podcast, I'll have an update, because we're seeing the vet this week. But I have to tell you all that the word tripod has been mentioned a number of times in conversations with the vet. So one of Phelim's earliest articles written when he was in Northern Ireland was about a tripod. So, many people know tripods. A three-legged dog. Three-legged dogs, three-legged cats. By the way, they get on fine, but I wouldn't like to see Mr. Top Cat losing his leg. Mag just look at the photographs of him here, because he's lying up beside me here, and he's been a very good cat. But
have you explained to him that you might be going to Serbia?
Well, I haven't broken that news to him yet. So hopefully people who come and stay here with the cat will be nice to him. But tell me more, Phil. I want you actually sent me this latest story about crazy California. And I know basically what's happened is Gavin Newsom, as many people know, he survived the recall, and he is smug like nobody. Like, he would win every award for smugness now. In fact, he's the smug man of the world. Yeah. Because he's won, basically. And he is now bringing in every stupid idea he's ever had in his back burner. Tell us what his latest ideas are, Phil, please.
In just 2 days, this is from the Daily Mail, California governor signed into law free menstrual products for girls mandates that you must study ethnic studies before you graduate from California high school, requires stores to have gender-neutral toy areas, and bans gas-powered lawnmowers and generators. So all these Hispanic gardeners.
Can I just say,
LA,
Phil, can I just say, and for the benefit of the people who are watching me, they're not getting to see Magda. So Magda sort of threw her head back in some kind of resignation there, because we're just talking about the future and what's going to happen here, because they're not going to stop. This stuff just won't stop, you know. Where did it stop? What happens? You know, what happens? But I think mainly what happens is people like us leave, because it just is already too much. Sorry, Phil, I interrupted you there. What were you going to say?
Well, I mean, it's, you know, it's so much there. I mean, mandating ethnic studies, you know what that means? White people are evil.
Yes.
You know, banning. I mean, I'm thinking of all these. I mean, people. Funny, it was only our next door neighbor who sort of said it. Like, people don't realize in LA, everyone has a gardener, right? And we don't realize that in most other parts of the world, people don't have gardeners, right? But there's this massive, in places like our community or Manhattan Beach or the whole of the West Side and Beverly Hills, like, everyone goes off to work in the morning, and then thousands of people, mostly Hispanics, come in and work the garden, tens of thousands. Like, it's this massive, I mean, so many cars on the 405 are pickup trucks with 2 Hispanics and a load of lawnmower equipment on the back of it. I mean, it's a major, it's probably, I'd say gardening is bigger than the movie industry in terms of people employed. And they're now saying to them, your lawnmower,
the equipment,
it can't be gas powered. It has to be electric powered. And the electric lawnmower is twice the price. And they're going to have, and these guys, they don't hang around. They do 5 gardens a day, 10 gardens a day. They're going to have to carry 30 or 40 batteries as well. And it's like, so it's a tax on the poorest people.
100%. And by the way, when you mentioned ethnic studies, it reminded me, and I visited our friends, Phil, our dear friends out in Arizona the other day, in Scottsdale. I was working out there, and their son was at the table. I hadn't told Magda this story. It's a good one, you know, but they left California because of schools, because of education, because of what happened at the school where their son attended. They're Jewish people. Their son attended a school here. And during break time, they were segregated. The children were segregated into ethnic groups, was one of the things that happened. But another thing that happened was the child was accused of not respecting the fact that he was a child of privilege. He would not accept that he was a child of privilege. And the father of the child said, we're Russian Jews. This boy's grandmother watched her own brother dig a grave and get shot into it. So don't talk to me. You know, this is the kind of privilege this child had been. But I'm getting off the point here just to give you a little bit of background about those friends. But you know exactly who I'm talking about, Phil. But what was really interesting was they took me out for a meal, and the 3 of us went out, and their son was at the table. He's, what age is he now, Magda? What age is he now? 13 or 14. So at the table, what did he have at the table? You know, because he hadn't quite finished. He had a test the next day. What do they call that thing in America? They don't call them tests. They have this other word for them. But anyway, he had one of those tests the next day, and he was reading the Iliad in Latin. He was reading the Iliad in Latin, and he's 13, maybe 13 or 14. And I just thought, he ain't doing ethnic studies. But my God, that boy is getting the most beautiful education. So he's getting a classical education in a really wonderful school in Scottsdale, and it's free. He's at a public school, or a public, what do they call it, Magda? Am I getting that wrong?
Charter
He's
school.
at a charter school, but he's going there for free, and he's getting this superior education. When he was here in Los Angeles, that boy, he was attending a private school, and I think it was either $30,000 or $40,000 a year. But he was paying that, and then having this nonsense and being told that he was a child of privilege when most of his family died in the concentration camps across Europe. So this is the kind of people. So that was apropos of the fact that Newsom wants to bring in ethnic studies here. Phelim, tell us about the recipe, because we're coming to the end of the show. Tell us about this. Now, it's not a recipe, really. It's you telling us about something you're enjoying eating. What do you enjoy eating?
I think the Serbians, they called it something like consolidated raspberries. You know, it's like, guys, can't you give it a romantic name? Like, you know, but it's I struck by the beauty of it. Actually, I didn't take a side-on picture of it, but it's basically, they told me it was egg, vanilla, cream, and then sugar sprinkled along the top, and they all mixed up, and the raspberries on a plate, and then this put on top of it, sugar sprinkled over it, and it's caramelized on top. And I'll have to tell you, it was pretty nice. Now,
when I get out there, I will have to try and work out exactly how that gets made. Yeah, that looks very, very nice. We're coming to the very end of the show. One thing, you guys a lot of you write to us, and it's really, really nice. Now, one person who just wrote to us this week, I'm not going to get into the details of the email because it became very personal by a woman sharing a story, and she was talking a lot about the disaster of COVID, particularly the disaster of COVID for children, and about her anecdotal experience in her area of the a very bad rise in COVID-related suicides by young people who just who this thing is interminable, and it's like they can't see an end in sight, and they're not getting to go to games, and all their life is totally, has been really ruined. Anyway, in her correspondence, she mentioned that her own son was struggling, and his father had committed suicide in the past, and the child was struggling. And this has come through on a lot of correspondence from people, quite a bit about this worry about suicide. I want to share something with everyone, and we're going to play it now. And it's actually written by a friend of ours, Film, as you know, Daniel Knopf. This is a scene from the Blacklist about suicide. And I share this with you, particularly for anyone who's trying to talk to someone who is suicidal. I think, you make the assessment for yourself, but basically this highlights for the person who is suicidal to understand the result, what will happen afterwards when they're gone. And that suicide is an act of terrorism against the people you leave behind. And they are the victims of a terrorist action that you brought about, which you shouldn't have brought about because you didn't realize that you would terrorize them for the rest of their lives and take away their peace of mind. And I think it's an incredibly powerful piece of footage. And I bring it to you as a kind of a gift. And I would say to people, you know your own family best, and you know your own friends best. But if this was a helpful tool, use it. And I would also ask you to go and look at it on YouTube. I'll find the link and I'll put the link there, and look at the things that people have said as a commentary underneath this incredible piece of drama. People have said it saved their lives. And maybe, this is a lot of about, the reason for what we do. Art has a bigger effect than every political speech that was ever made. Art can change the whole world, and people should make more art, and people like us should make more art.
Have you ever seen the aftermath of a suicide bombing?
We're wasting time.
I have. June 29th, 2003. I was meeting two associates at the Marouche restaurant in Tel Aviv. As my car was pulling off, a 20-year-old Palestinian named Ghazi Safar entered the restaurant and detonated a vest wired with C4. The shockwave knocked me flat. You could tell where Safar was standing when the vest blew. It was like a perfect circle of death. There was almost nothing left of the people closest to him. 17 dead, 46 injured, blown to pieces. The closer they were to the bomber, the more horrific the effect. That's every suicide. Every single one. An act of terror perpetrated against everyone who's ever known you, everyone who's ever loved you, the people closest to you, the ones who cherish you, are the ones who suffer the most pain, the most damage. Why would you do that? Why would you do that to people who love you?
I have no choice.
There's always a choice.
Here ended the lesson from Anne McElhenney.